Hi guys, welcome back. We're now discussing October-November 2025, paper 11. So let's get started. Question number 1 says consumers and producers face the problem of satisfying wants. What is the most likely reason wants cannot be satisfied? The first answer option says consumers and producers cannot establish an equilibrium price. This answer would be wrong because equilibrium price is about demand and supply in a market, and it is not the main reason why wants cannot be satisfied. Question part B says consumers have excess choice when producers oversupply. Again, this is wrong because excess choice or oversupply is not the basic economic problem, right? The issue that we're dealing the issue basically is scarcity, right? So this is incorrect. So part C, let's leave part C for now, but option D says consumers lack information to buy and producers lack motivation to supply. This is incorrect as well because lack of information or motivation may affect markets, but it is not the main reason why wants are unlimited and cannot be fully satisfied. Option C is the correct answer because consumers and producers face the basic economic problem because wants are unlimited but resources are limited. So consumers have limited incomes, they cannot buy everything they want. Producers also have finite resources such as land, labor, capital. They cannot produce everything they want, hence you have an opportunity cost. Question number 2, a worker decides to leave their job as a bus driver and take a job as a lorry driver. What will increase the opportunity cost of this decision? Option A says an increase in the holidays for lorry drivers, and this is incorrect because more holidays for drivers would make the new job more attractive, and this does not increase what is given up. The question is asking what will increase the opportunity cost, right? So opportunity cost is the value of the next best alternative that is given up. So if a worker leaves the bus driver job to become a lorry driver, then the opportunity cost is what they give up from being a bus driver. So the answer, by the way, has to be C for Charlie, because if bus driver wages increase the job, if the bus driver wages if they increase, the job they give up becomes more valuable then. So the opportunity cost of becoming that lorry driver increases because you're giving up a lot of wages now, right? Because you left your job as a bus driver. Others are incorrect as well. Option B says an increase in the income tax paid by bus drivers. This is incorrect because higher income tax for bus drivers would reduce the net benefit of being a bus driver. So this would reduce the opportunity cost actually. Again, question and D for David is incorrect as well. A lot of students did end up marking D. They'll end up marking D because D is wrong because higher wages for lorry drivers increases the benefit of the chosen job, not the cost of the sacrificed job. So D is incorrect as well. Question number 3, the diagram shows a PPC. What would cause a movement from X to Y? Decrease in productivity. Well, yeah, this could be so this is the answer, decrease in productivity, because when you're moving from X to Y, that results into idle resources or unemployed workers basically, or unemployed resources. So it means that the resources are not being fully or efficiently used. So a decrease in productivity means that the same resources that you have end up producing less output. So it means that the resources are not being fully or efficiently used. That's another one of the meaning when you move inside the curve. From on the curve you move inside the curve, so either resources are idle or there's a spare capacity. Or another way to look at this is that resources are not being fully used or efficiently used. So a decrease in productivity would mean that same resources produce less output, and hence you move inside the PPC because the economy is now producing below what it potentially can. So the economy is producing less or below its potential. That is why A is the correct answer. Option B says decrease in unemployment. Now if unemployment goes down, you will actually move from Y to X, or closer to the curve. If this would have been increase in unemployment, then this could have been the answer. So an increase in unemployment, if the unemployment goes up, you move inside the curve, but if unemployment goes down, then you move closer to the curve or on the curve. Got it? So question number 4 says the price of petrol increase with a market economic system. What is a consequence of this? Option A is wrong because higher petrol prices make running cars more expensive. So demand for cars is likely to fall, not rise. So option A is incorrect. Option B, the cost of road transport increase. This should be the answer because petrol is an important cost for road transport. So if the price of petrol goes up, if the price of petrol goes up, then firms that are using vans, buses, and taxis face higher fuel costs. So the cost of road transport will increase then. So 4 is the correct answer. Question number 5 says, what determines a consumer's demand for a product? And the correct answer, consumer's income determines the consumer willing to. Option A should be the correct answer, because you see, what is demand? Demand means the willingness and the ability to buy a product at a given price. So consumers' demand depends upon the price of the product. Yes, it depends upon the willingness to buy it, and it also depends upon the consumer's income. Willingness matters because they want to buy they must want the product. Income matters because consumers need purchasing power to buy the product, so they must have financially, they have that purchasing power to buy the product. Price matters because it affects how much they are willing and able, how much of the product they're willing and able to buy. That is why price matters too. So question number 5A. And because when you're measuring demand, you're actually measuring demand against the price of the product, so how much you will end up buying. So all three got it. Question 6 says the diagram shows a market for a product. The what distance shows a market equilibrium caused by excess supply? Which distance shows a market disequilibrium caused by excess supply? So the answer has to be A for alpha, UV. So this is because at P2 this is your quantity supplied, Q2, while Q3 is your quantity demanded. So this is your excess supply, also called a surplus. By the way, sometimes they could give you alphabets, and they could ask you to calculate this distance for surplus or this distance for shortage. XW is for shortage, UV for surplus. Sometimes they could also ask you to measure from the quantity axis. So Q3 minus Q2 or Q2 minus Q3 is simply representing your surplus quantity. A to V should be the answer for surplus. Surplus is a disequilibrium. By the way, shortage is also a disequilibrium. Excess demand, excess supply are disequilibriums, because quantity demanded is not equal to quantity supplied. Question number 7 is saying the PED of a good is -1. Now -1 is unitary elastic, and when you are drawing a demand curve for unitary elastic, it is drawn like a rectangular hyperbola, where remember the characteristic is that the percentage change in quantity demanded exactly equals the percentage change in price. That is why the elasticity is 1, and minus is simply representing the inverse relation. Now the point of matter of consideration is, it says what will happen to both demand and total revenue as price goes up. So if the price goes up, quantity demanded obviously will fall, and that is exactly why the answer has to be in minus sign. So demand will fall, but total revenue will not change, since the reason is that the feature of when PED is -1, or when PED is simply unitary elastic, total expenditure for the consumers and total revenue for the firms do not change. And the simple reason is that the percentage change in price is met by an exact percentage fall in quantity demanded. If price is going up by 10%, quantity demanded falls by 10%. So there's a proportionate change in quantity demanded, and as a result, there's no change in total revenue or total expenditure for the consumers. So option A should be the correct answer. Question number 8 says, which pair of economic institutions can be found in the market economy? This is a very repeated MCQ. The answer is B for boy, multinationals and commercial banks. All the rest are correct. A is incorrect because charities can exist in a market economy, but public sector firms are government-owned firms. They are not defining. Public sector firms are not the defining institutions of a market economy. C is incorrect as well because public sector firms can exist, but public sector firms. Public sector firms basically they cannot exist. They're not something specific to a market economy institution, but private sector firms can exist because the emphasis in the market economy is on private ownership. Option D, government funded hospitals. Stock exchanges can exist, but government funded hospitals belong to the public sector, right? Although government funded hospitals could even exist in a market economy, but in very small numbers, very small numbers, but they're not the typical market institutions. The question is asking which pair of economic institutions can be found in a market economy. So yes, but again, government funded hospital is not the best answer. Small amounts could exist in a market economy, practically speaking, but theoretically speaking, none will exist, but practically they can. But for something that we are 100% sure is multinationals and commercial banks, because they're both profit maximizing organizations with the objective of profit maximization as the objective. Question number 9 says, the table shows the demand supply. What will be the effect if government imposes a minimum price of 40? So first you need to find the equilibrium price, demand and supply, where where price, demand and supply are equal, which is 12 and 12. which means that the equilibrium price has to be $30, where there's no excess demand, excess supply. Demand supply both are equal at 12 at 30 at 12 units at $30. So pretty simple. What happens when a minimum price is imposed? It is imposed above the equilibrium at $40. We know that the demand is going to fall to 10 while supply will extend to 14, so you have a surplus of 4 units, let's say. So question number 9, they're not asking you to measure the surplus, but the answer to question number 9 has to be C, a surplus of X. What is the function of money when it is used to value and record transactions? What is the function of money? Money when it is used to value and record the transaction, so a unit of account, because money performs 4 functions. Number 1, medium of exchange, unit of account, store of value, standard of deferred payment. We know that. But the question refers to valuing the goods and about recording transactions, and they both are functions of the unit of account. Why? Because unit of account means that the money provides a common measure of value. It means that the money is providing a common measure of value. So, prices can be quoted and records can be kept. Got it? So question number 10 has to be D for David. Question number 11 says, with the table shows household spending. See, income equals to C plus S. That is, either you will consume it or you will save it. So what is the first level of income shown at which saving is positive? So at an income of 4,000, you're spending 4,150, which means that you're using your past savings. Because your income is 4,000, how can you spend 4,150? Because you must have had past savings, right? So you're utilizing your past savings, which is actually negative 150. Negative 150 means that you are now utilizing your savings. So it's also called dis savings. You're utilizing your savings, right? 4375 again, negative 75 saving, negative 50 saving, saving 0, 225 is saved, because 5200 minus 4975 is 225 is saved. Again, 225 is saved over here as well. So what is the first level of income at which saving is positive? It is 5200. So the first level of income at which saving becomes positive is is basically 5200. So the answer option has to be question 11 has to be D for David. Now moving to question number 12. Now before I move on to question number 12, guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe. The wages of school teachers are rising. What is least likely to be the cause of this? Least likely. So remember that they're saying least likely. This is a distractor. It's called a trap in MCQ or examination terminology. It's called a distractor. It's written to distract you and to basically trap you to marking the wrong answer. Now, what is least likely to be the cause of this? So the answer has to be A for alpha, decreased membership of teaching trade unions, because the reason is that they're asking what is the least likely factor that is causing teacher wages to rise. So trade unions negotiate for higher wages through collective bargaining, right? So if trade union membership decreases, then union becomes weaker and also the bargaining power of the union will fall. And obviously it means that it becomes harder to obtain a wage rise, right? Therefore, a decrease in the trade union membership is unlikely to cause wages to rise. That's what make A the correct answer. The other answer options are wrong as well. For instance, if you look at answer option B, it says, if parents basically place greater emphasis on education, there will be increased demand for teachers. So higher demand for teachers would lead to higher wages. Option C is incorrect as well. More restriction on immigration from other countries of teachers. Again, see, if more restriction on the immigration now. So if fewer foreign teachers can enter the country, the supply of teachers fall, and a fall in the labor supply will increase the wages of the teachers. Option D, the opening of new schools. New schools require additional teachers, demand for teachers will increase, higher demand pushes wages upwards. So again, this is incorrect as well. What is the feature of every trade union? Members are trade union, again, organization of workers that are formed to protect and improve their members' interests, right? And the key feature of trade union, remember, is collective bargaining. But what do you mean by collective bargaining? It means that workers negotiate together rather than individually. That's what collective bargaining means, and this actually strengthens their bargaining power. Therefore, B option is correct. A is wrong because, see, trade union members are not always unskilled workers. Many skilled workers belong to trade unions as well. Teachers, doctors, pilots, engineers may even belong to trade unions. C is incorrect as well because trade union members do not have to work for the same employer. Workers from different employers can belong to the same trade union, right? There could be an industry trade union where workers from different employers that that belong to different firms but under the same industry belong to that industry's union. D is incorrect as well because, again, D is incorrect because trade unions do not always represent workers from a single industry, right? Some unions represent workers from a range of different occupations as well. Maybe you have a national union or something, right? So again, this is incorrect as well. That is representing workers from different industries, right? What must occur if a firm experiences economies of scale? Pretty simple. The correct answer has to be A for alpha, average cost falls, because economies of scale occur when a firm's average cost falls as output goes up. That is cost per unit. Average cost goes down. And we know what average cost is, right? Total cost divided by the output. So if the output is going up, right, and the rate at which the output is going up and the rate at which the total cost is not, if this is going up by a larger extent but this is going up by a small extent, then average cost will fall. And the reason why this goes up by a small extent is because of economies of scale. That's why average cost falls, right, while the output is going up. So the denominator is expanding too much while the numerator isn't really expanding a lot. So the average cost has to fall. And the reason why numerator isn't expanding a lot, it has to do with economies of scale. As you scale up, as you produce more output. Again, rest of the options are incorrect. Profits decreases. See, economies of scale often increases profitability because cost per unit is falling. So profits do not have to decrease. Incorrect. Number of workers increase. A firm may achieve economies of scale without really increasing employment. So, for example, it could invest in machinery, causing technical economies of scale and because of automation. So this is incorrect as well. Total advertising cost decrease. Total advertising cost may actually increase. What matters for us is average cost per unit. So marketing cost or advertising cost, which is actually a fixed expense, so fixed cost per unit of output is actually falling, which is, for instance, which is actually causing economies of scale, which is actually known as marketing economies of scale. That would the fact that fixed cost per unit of output is falling, because what you can say is that a fixed cost is spread over a larger volume of output, which is causing economies of scale to happen. That is marketing economies of scale to happen, which is actually going to cause average cost to go down. So in total terms, total advertising cost will increase, but fixed cost per unit will fall, which will cause average cost per unit or simply average cost to go down. Because average cost is actually the sum of fixed cost per unit, or average fixed cost. I mean, average cost is also could also be said is the sum of average fixed cost plus average variable cost. So if this goes down, average cost will go down. So remember, advertising cost is actually a fixed cost, and if output scales up, so that advertising cost in terms of fixed cost may go down per unit terms, not total terms. Got it? Question number 15 says, so again, question number 15, what is the firm's total variable cost and output of 100? Now this is, again, a lot of times they ask us this. 100 units is the total output, right? So you need to know, so this is your fixed cost diagram, this is your like what variable cost, this is your total cost. So they're asking what is the variable cost. The variable cost has to be what? 50,000. So question number 15, David, because this is the variable cost. You need to know the variable cost curve. Remember that. So remember, fixed cost, this is your fixed cost line, this is your variable cost line, and total cost line starts from here, from your fixed cost. Why does total cost line start from fixed cost? Because when 0 units are produced, at 0 units, the fixed cost equals total cost. That's why. So question number 15 is David. Question number 16 says, again, these sort of questions do come. Make sure that you practice them. Usually, in the middle, when the microeconomics MCQs are ending, after 15 and 16, just start with the macro. So towards the end of the micro MCQs, these MCQs from costing are tested. Question 16, if the average revenue of a firm increases from 4 to 5, quantity demanded decreases from 20 to 10, what will affect on total revenue? Pretty simple. So what is the formula for total revenue? Total revenue would be average revenue times the quantity. What is average revenue? Average revenue is simply, what is average revenue actually? Average revenue is total revenue divided by quantity, right? So if you want to find total revenue, you need to multiply average revenue by quantity, simply. So at a price of 4 units, at a price of $4, 4 times quantity demanded was 20 is like $80. That was at a price of $4, but when, the firms, and by the way, the price is always equal to the average revenue. So the selling price goes to $5, which is the average revenue. So $5 times your 10 units would give you what? $50. So total revenue is actually decreasing by $30, right? So it decreases by 30. Sometimes students end up making a mistake. They say increase by 30. They don't figure out that, price is actually going down. Now the macro starts. What are the two macroeconomic aims of the government? Question number 17. Question 17 says, got it. So I hope this question number 16 is by the way clear. You need to know these formulas. What is total revenue? And you must know that price. Average revenue is simply the selling price per unit. This is the selling price per unit, average revenue. Okay, these sort of questions do come. So you must know the formula for total revenue, average revenue. And the formula for total revenue is simply price times quantity. The formula for average revenue is total revenue divided by quantity. Learn these formulas. Question 17, what are the two macroeconomic aims of the government? Pretty simple question. The answer has to be B for boy, to create economic growth and prevent high inflation. I mean, this is pretty simple MCQ, to create economic growth and prevent high inflation. Option A, allocating resources is mainly like a microeconomic issue, and reducing trade union membership is not a standard macroeconomic objective. While in C it says to raise interest rates and reduce pollution. Again, raising interest rates is a policy tool, not an economic aim. Similarly, reducing pollution is important, but it is not usually classified as one of the major macroeconomic objectives. Option D, it says to reduce exports and increase imports. Now, governments generally want to encourage exports and reduce excessive imports, but reducing exports and increasing imports would actually what I'm saying is the government would generally want to encourage exports and reduce excessive imports, right? They wouldn't really want to reduce exports and increase imports, because this would make the current account deficit, worsen the deficit, and we want to reduce the deficit. That's our objective. This would worsen the balance of trade position, and we don't want that. That's why option B is correct. Question 18 says a government spending equals its revenue. The government decides to decrease the spending. What is the most likely? So if the government spending increases the revenue, so you have a balanced budget. So a balanced budget means that government spending would equal tax revenue. Budget surplus would mean that government spending exceeds tax revenue. Budget deficit would mean that government spending is budget surplus would mean that government spending is less than tax revenue, and budget deficit would be government spending is more than tax revenue. So the government would need to borrow to finance the deficit over here, because how will it spend then if the tax revenue is not sufficient? So again, they're saying the government decides to decrease the spending. So if you decrease the spending, then the spending gets less than tax revenue, so you will end up with a budget surplus. Question number 18 has to be B for boy. Got it? Question number 19 says, what is not a monetary policy measure? Again, this is such an easy MCQ, a change in income tax, because the question is asking you to differentiate between fiscal and monetary policy, and the rest of the three are monetary policies. See, monetary policy involves, remember, interest rate changes, money supply changes, and sometimes even exchange rate management. And the reason why exchange rate management is sometimes classified as monetary policy is because exchange rate is actually a policy tool that the central bank does. And since monetary policy falls under the domain of the central bank, therefore exchange rate management is actually considered a monetary policy as well by a lot of economists. Got it? So changes in income tax. And this is actually a fiscal policy, changes in income tax rates. Question number 20, which government action would not be included as a part of supply side policy? Now, what is a supply side policy? Supply side policies are policies that are actually aimed to increase the productive capacity of an economy and to increase the efficiency of an economy. And the objective is to shift the LRAS to the right diagrammatically, which is also simply saying to shift the PPC outwards. It's another way of saying shifting the PPC outwards. Anyways, there's nothing to do with the diagram here, but that was the point to tell you guys. Anyways, question number 20. There are different ways in which the government could achieve a supply side policy. There are two objectives of supply side policies. Number one, you want to increase the productive capacity, productive potential of the economy, and number two, to increase the productivity and the efficiency of the entire economy. So you do that through labor market reforms, improving the incentives to work for people, improving competition in the economy, privatization, investing in education and healthcare infrastructure. These are all supply side measures. So what action would not be included, right? So the answer has to be C for Charlie, because raising tariffs on international trade is a protectionist trade policy for trade. It's a trade barrier. It's not a supply side policy. All the other are supply side policies. Lowering national minimum wage rates. Lowering national minimum wage rate is actually done. This is actually done to improve labor market flexibility, because when you impose high minimum wages, this is demand and supply of labor. When you impose very high minimum wages, it creates surplus labor and it creates inflexibility. Because it creates surplus unemployed labor. So you want to improve labor market and flexibility so that more people are employed, and you want to lower the national minimum wage. That's okay. So that is actually supply side policy. Reducing state benefits would be a supply. Reducing state benefits is actually considered a supply side measure, because reducing state benefits will encourage people to enter employment. This will increase the labor supply and hence considered a supply side measure. Privatization is a supply side measure because it increases competition and it also improves efficiency in the economy. So these are actually all supply side measures. A, B, and D are so C is the correct answer. The question is saying what is not to be included as a supply side measure. Got it? Question 21, which is a good question. It says an economy is operating on the PPC enters a recession that causes unemployment. Now PPC, actually the thing is the PPC itself is a micro topic when it comes to scarcity and movement along the curves and all of that stuff, but and when it's measuring opportunity cost and all that, but PPC is also connected with growth and recession. So yeah. Anyways, as the recession gets worse, some unemployed workers emigrate with an E for exit. So emigrate means moving out. So that reduces the size of the labor force. That should ideally cause a shift in PPC to the left. In search of jobs overseas, how are these effects of recession shown on a diagram on the PPC in the short term and the long term? So the short term effect would be, because remember at the start of the video as well, I told you when unemployment goes up, so you will move to a point from A to B because of idle resources and spare capacity. So obviously it means that the economy has the goddamn resources, but it's producing less output, which means that the economy is in a recession. It means that workers are unemployed and they're sitting at home instead of working. So if they're sitting at home instead of working, they are not able to, or they're not able to find jobs. They're not producing output, less GDP and growth, which means that economy is producing less than what it can produce, because the PPC line itself shows what you can produce, right? But if you're inside it, it means that you're producing less than what you can produce. But the long-term consequence would be that if that is causing the workers to move to other countries, it reduces the size of the labor force, and the economy would, let's say, if you move from, let's say, point A to, let's say, inside the curve to, let's say, point B, economy would ultimately shift to the left. The PPC curve would shift to the left ultimately in the long run, right? So the answer has to be, for question number 21, has to be B for boy, movement to a point inside the PPC, then shift to the left. Okay. Question number 22 says Chile specializes in the production of copper for export. In what way is the Chilean economy likely to be affected by a large rise in the supply of copper from another countries? Question number 22. It's a good question. See, the thing is that Chile specializes in producing the copper for export, right? So it might have some sort of a competitive edge. So the thing is that the question is actually stating that other countries are greatly increasing the supply of copper. In what ways is the Chilean economy likely to be affected by large rise in the supply of copper from other countries? So let's say that, okay, fine. So let's say it sort of means that the world supply for the copper is going up. So the world supply for copper goes up because that's what the question is sort of hinting us, that there's a large rise in the supply of copper from other countries. So it means that the world supply of copper is going up now. So it means that the world price, since world supply is of copper is going up, it means that the world price of copper would fall, which means that Chile earns, because of lower price, Chile earns less export revenues. Because let's say Chile was exporting at, let's say, $10, now it's exporting only at $6 because of a fall in the world price of copper. Which means that the mining firms would reduce production of copper, which means that workers may lose jobs. So as a result, the employment would fall. As a result, economic growth will fall as well. That's why A is the answer. Employment will fall because of the reason that I just told you. Thing is that since copper, the question says since copper is an important export industry for Chile, right? So lower export earnings would translate in lower national income and lower real GDP for Chile and lower economic growth. So therefore, economic growth is also likely to fall. That's the whole entire chain of analysis and the logic. This was a very good macro question that it was asking students. So question number 22, great question. I like it. Putting a smile here. Anyways, question number 23. The table shows the patterns of employment in selected industries in 2 years. So you have like tertiary, primary, secondary sectors given. Employment is given in million total people employed. How did the patterns of employment change between year 1 and year 2? Now, if you look at the secondary sector, which is the manufacturing sector The employment is falling in the manufacturing sector from 12 to 10. So secondary sector is actually falling because manufacturing is falling from 12 to 10. And if you look at the tertiary sector, but we need to ignore the primary sector. It's of no use for us. So the tertiary sector would include service like hospitality and retailing. So in year 1 it's 8 plus 8, that is 8 plus 8 is like in year 1 16 people employed, but then in year 2 it's like 10 plus 10, so it's 20 in year 2. So more people are employed in tertiary, so it's like rising, right? So it's rising, tertiary is rising. So the answer has to be 23, has to be A for alpha. The correct answer is secondary fell, tertiary rose. Pretty simple. Okay, so they're testing economic knowledge with respect to numbers and tables, and just want you to use your brain here and just figure out stuff. I mean, okay. Question number 24, what is deflation? Pretty simple. Deflation refers to a sustained fall in the general price level. It means that we know that average prices of goods and services are across the economy are falling over time. It's also known as negative inflation. Remember, in deflation, the cost of living, if the cost of living ideally falls due to falling price levels, and the real value of money rises. Question number 24, the answer has to be for by sustained fall in general price level. What is most likely to cause poverty in a country? Question number 25, a decrease in general price level. So a decrease in general price level will increase the purchasing power, and people can buy more with the same income. So this is unlikely to increase poverty. So this is not the right answer. Option B says a lower income tax rate. A lower income tax rate would increase disposable incomes. People would keep more of what they're earning. The disposable income goes up. This would generally reduce the poverty, not increase it. Option C says a decrease in the level of unemployment. Lower unemployment means more people have more jobs and incomes, and this is likely to reduce poverty, not increase it. A decrease in the level of wages is correct, because a decrease in the level of wages would mean workers have less incomes, households have less purchasing power, and more people would struggle to afford even basic necessities. Question number 25, David. The chart shows the population structure of country X and in year X and year X plus 50, which means this is, let's say, 2000 and year 2000, and this would be 2050, right? During this period, how did birth rates and death rates change? So if you want to look at, so this is the population pyramid. I'm sure you must have studied this in economics and also in grade 10 geography. But how did birth rate change, right? So if you look at in year X, if you look at these babies who were born how do you look at that? So look at the number of, so on the left hand side you have these males and the female ages. So look at people from the age of 0 to 4. This is generally what's going to be telling you about the birth rate. From age 0 to age 4. Look at these people. So in year X, if you look at year X, right? So look at the look at the base. So this is like 2 million males and let's say 2 million females. But look at in year 2050 or 2050, year X plus 50. It's fallen to 1.5 and fallen to 1.5. So the base is narrowing, right? This base is narrowing down in year X plus 50, which means that less babies, which means birth rate is falling. So birth rate is falling. But look at the death rate. In order to see the death rate, just look at ages on the higher end. Look at the higher ages. Look at the upper income age groups. All these upper income age groups, they are rising. This base is actually broadening. Look at people from 40 to 44, that's broadening as well. People in the 50s, that's broadening as well. People 60s, that's broadening. Look at people 85 plus, that's even broadening. There were no males who used to survive at the age of 85 plus in this year X. But now you have a few males surviving and you have more females surviving as well. So the upper income age groups are becoming much larger. They are surviving. It means more people are surviving into older age. They're getting into older age. They're surviving the older age. This suggests that people are actually living longer and fewer people are dying at a younger age. This means that your death rate is also falling. So death rate fell, birth rate fell as well. Hence, option A should be the correct answer. Got it? That's how you do these MCQs. So remember, a narrower base, I want you to write this down, that a narrower base suggests falling birth rate. Please ignore my writing, and my thoughts are racing right now, so it's difficult for me to write so properly. But that's not how I usually write. Don't worry. Narrower base suggests falling birth rates, and a large elderly population suggests falling death rates and a longer life expectancy. Got it? Question number 27. What is an advantage for consumers from international specialization? See, what do you mean by international specialization? See, firms specialize, workers specialize. International specialization, countries specialize. International specialization means countries concentrate on producing those goods and services in which they are relatively more efficient. For example, Pakistan is more efficient at producing agriculture because of its natural resources and soil and climate. Germany in cars. France in, let's say, wine, right? Cuba for cigars, let's say. So international so again, if countries specialize, if they do international specialization, what they would do is that they would produce those goods in which they have an edge and competitive advantage in, and then they would export those goods to other countries and import those goods which they can't produce themselves. So instead of being self-sufficient and producing everything themselves, they would specialize in those goods in which they have a competitive advantage in, because they're efficient at producing it, their workers are skilled at that, or maybe they have the natural resources for that. And then the countries engage in international trade. For example, countries export to China and US while they import goods from China and US as well for a lot of things that they can't produce at a lower cost themselves, right? So greater competition would mean that it would lead to lower prices, better quality, and greater choice. That is why option A is the correct answer. Competition between firms results in lower prices. It says what is an advantage for consumers from international specialization. So what is going to happen is, because of international specialization, you will trade. When countries trade internationally, it increases competition for domestic firms. If Pakistani electronic goods are very expensive and of poor quality, that is why China dumps their products here. If we are importing from China, which are better quality and lower priced, it will threaten the Pakistani market producers, and they would improve competition. They would actually improve the product quality and lower the price. So competition would result in lower prices. Remember that international specialization would always increase competition, which will lead to lower prices and greater choice and variety for consumers. That's why question number 27 is A for alpha. The rest are wrong. Why? Because option B, labor can move freely between countries. Now, labor mobility is not the main consumer benefit from international specialization. The question is asking about consumer benefit. Option C, less wealth is created throughout the world. See, international specialization would usually increase more efficiency and it would create more wealth between nations. It does not reduce wealth. Option D is incorrect as well. It says multinational companies can increase their profits. See, higher profits of multinational companies may benefit the shareholders, not the consumers. The question is asking about consumers. Question number 28 says, which government policy would encourage greater international trade? Usually the last few questions are on international trade, current account, BOP, exchange rate. 28 should be C for Charlie, the abolition of domestic subsidies for declining industries. The question is basically asking here which policy would encourage greater international trade. So if you abolish the domestic subsidies for declining industries, it means that inefficient firms receive less protection. Because they're inefficient, they're declining, let them shut down. Why you're making them more complacent and dependent on you while they aren't improving either. So that instead of use that money for something else. So resources can actually now move into resources and money can actually move into industries where the country is more, competitive internationally. See the point what I'm trying to say. Okay, so let me explain this, what this MCQ. See, you have to understand this. If, let's say, Pakistan is producing good X and Pakistan produces it pathetically at a very, very high price and at a very high cost as well, and consumers then pay a very high price to buy it, and Pakistani firms are highly inefficient, let's say. So why is Pakistan even producing it? And Pakistani government is giving subsidies to Pakistan to produce it. You're wasting subsidy money. Subsidy money is tax money. It has an opportunity cost. That money could be spent elsewhere on, education, healthcare. So why is Pakistan producing it? Then what should Pakistan do? Don't produce it. Import from somewhere at a lower price. Let those countries produce it who can produce it at a lower cost. Why are you competing with them? Got it? You are a very high cost producer. Let resources flow to those countries. Let resources flow to those countries who are low cost producing countries, who are more efficient countries at producing that good. That's why I said that resources can now move into those industries where the country is more competitive internationally. Instead of giving subsidies to failed firms in Pakistan, give subsidies to those firms, those goods which Pakistan can produce at a very low cost. Let's say Pakistan is very good at producing agriculture at a low cost. So give subsidies to agriculture. Support agriculture sector of Pakistan. Protect it. So that you can export at a much lower cost now. So resources can move into those industries where the country has a more competitive advantage or is more competitive internationally, instead of protecting failed domestic industries. This generally would end up promoting more international trade, and it would end up making the markets more open even. Why? Because now that more money will be used to protect those industries that actually would generate more export revenue, and Pakistan is competitive at producing it, which will mean that Pakistan's export prices will go down for those goods, and Pakistan will be able to enter more export global markets internationally, which will result in more international trade. So it's saying which government policy would encourage greater international trade. The abolition of domestic subsidies for declining industries. What will happen is, the moment you abolish domestic subsidies for failed declining industries, you save that money, you use that money to protect those industries and give subsidies to those industries that can actually generate higher export revenue for you, which Pakistan can actually produce it competitively, in which Pakistan has a competitive edge or advantage to produce it, right? So that's why option C is the correct option. The others are incorrect because option A says an increase in domestic regulation. An increase in domestic regulation would increase the cost of firms. This might discourage the trade rather than encourage it. Option B says increasing the level of tariffs on imports. Tariffs are taxes on imports. Higher tariffs will reduce international trade, not increase. Option D says free trade agreements, abolition of free trade agreements. Free trade agreements are actually designed to increase trade between countries. If you abolish them, that reduces trade. Question number 29. So 28 has to be 28 has to be C for Charlie. Got it? Question number 29 says the US currently trades oil with the UK. The discovery of new oil and gas deposits in the US will mean that its oil imports decrease and its oil exports increase. So US oil export goes down. Oil exports go up. Oil exports go up and oil imports go down. From this initial equilibrium, which later indicates a new equilibrium position for the US. Again, pretty simple. So on the horizontal and the vertical axis, you have quantity of dollars. So if oil exports are going up, it means demand for dollars will now rise because people will need to buy more dollars to pay US firms. And oil imports into US are going down, which means that supply of dollars would actually go down, because if you're importing less oil, then you need less dollars to import oil now. So supply of dollars will shift to the left while demand will shift to the right. So if this was the original equilibrium position for foreign currency, so this was like the price of dollars in terms of other currency. So demand will shift to the right while supply would shift to the left. So the new equilibrium position has to be, I guess, B for boy. So the correct answer has to be for 29, right? The correct answer for 29 has to be B for boy. So for this, you need to know that if oil exports are going up, the demand for the currency rises, because when you're exporting more, you need that currency to pay the firms of those countries, right? So demand for your currency goes up, and if you're importing less, the supply of your currency goes down. So for these sort of MCQs, you need to know what influences demand and supply of the currency, right? And the MCQ booklet that I've recently shared for that revision MCQ booklet notes, that has all these points. Question number 30 says, what is most likely to directly result from a persistent and large current account surplus on the balance of payment of a country? So A says a lower exchange rate. See, a lower exchange rate thing is that a current account surplus tends to increase the demand for a country's currency, and this usually causes the exchange rate to rise rather than fall, right? So the question is saying what is most likely to directly result from a persistent large. So if you have a persistent large surplus, what will happen then? Your exchange rate will go up, not go down. Option B says a lower standard of living. Higher exports you have a current account surplus due to higher exports and you're generating higher incomes. That means it would improve the living standards rather than reduce them. So this is incorrect as well. A and B are incorrect. Option D says an increase in the unemployment rate. Again, higher export demand because of higher current account surplus would usually create more jobs in the export sector. And that would have a spillover effect over other industries as well. Higher employment would be generated all over the country. Unemployment is more likely to fall here rather than rise. So again, this is wrong. C is the correct increase in GDP, which is correct, because a persistent large current account surplus would mean that export earnings, consistently increases. What do you mean by current account surplus? It means that export earnings consistently increase import spending. Export revenues increase import expenditures, and this results in higher net exports. So this is actually injecting. Remember, this injects income into the circular flow. It injects income into the economy. So as exports grow for the economy, as exports grow, firms produce more. As they produce more, employment rises, and national income or real GDP output rises. So it increases real GDP output then. Got it, guys? So because GDP is the value of the output produced within a country, so GDP is likely to rise here. That is why the answer to question number 30 is C. And with that, we also end the paper. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, take care.